if you go back to '94, think about what a pivotal moment that was for the sport here. It really led to restarting the professional game in the United States with the founding of Major League Soccer and tremendous growth that we've experienced over the last 30 years.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom. Today's episode comes from SBJ's The Business of Soccer event in Atlanta, where Clark Hunt, chairman and CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs and chairman of FC Dallas, sat down with Coy Wire of CNN for a fireside chat on leadership, legacy, and the future of football. Recorded on March 25th, 2026, this conversation explores Hunt's unique vantage point across both American football and global soccer, along with the responsibility of carrying forward one of the most influential legacies in sports. From building championship teams to expanding the reach of the game, Hunt shares how he's thinking about the long-term growth, global opportunity, and what comes next. Let's go on stage.
As chairman and CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs, you've been to 5 of the last 7 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl wins, but you also know a thing or two about soccer. You played at SMU, team captain at SMU in his college days. How has soccer been instrumental to you, and what moments kind of stand out to making you the man you are today?
Well, first of all, let me just say how great it is to be here with everybody. It's awesome to have a conference focused on the sport of soccer with the World Cup right around the corner. As the video highlighted a little bit, I grew up in a very unusual home, one where sports was very central, and my dad at any one time was involved in 4 different professional sports. The one that was left out by the video is basketball. He was one of the founding investors in the Chicago Bulls. So I grew up going to sporting events. His involvement in the North American Soccer League in Dallas with the Dallas Tornado really got me interested in the sport of soccer as a youth. And then on top of that, we started attending World Cups when I was about 9 years old. My first one was 1974 in West Germany, and it was absolutely an amazing experience, and I've been fortunate enough to attend every World Cup since, with the exception of 1978. So the World Cups have been part of my story, our family's story, but it certainly is a key reason why my dad got involved in the business. He saw the passion of the fans at the World Cups. And he also looked at the fields and thought, you know, that field looks a lot like an American football field. You know, maybe we can play soccer in the summer on these new fields in these new stadiums that the American Football League was building. So that was really how he got involved in the sport. And so I was fortunate enough from age 7 or 8 just to grow up with the sport. And then went on to SMU and was fortunate enough to play on some really good teams.
And you have to tell the story about how you came to play soccer at SMU, because that wasn't the original plan.
That's exactly right, and I'm going to sound a little foolish in sharing this story, but I actually went to SMU to play football. I'd played both in high school, and I'd been lightly recruited in both, emphasis on lightly there. And I believed that I could go and make the SMU football team despite the fact they had just finished ranked number 1 or number 2 in the country and had the second best recruiting class in the country coming in. I spent a week on the football team during freshman week, and I realized that there were a lot of guys that were a lot bigger than me, sort of like Coy right here, right? And I didn't want to be hit by those guys for the next 5 years. So I literally walked out of the football locker room, down the hall, into the soccer locker room, introduced myself to the coach, who I didn't know, and said, hey, can I try out for the team? And he cut me some slack because I was by no means in shape to play soccer, but he gave me a number of months to get in shape, and I eventually made the team, and it all worked out great. And really, I didn't know at the time, but it was preparing me for being involved with Major League Soccer, which wouldn't come for another decade plus later. But I'm so glad that I had that experience and was part of a college soccer program where I got to see the sport at the highest level at that point in the U.S.
Yeah, I'd say it turned out all right. 3-year starter, team captain, and those hits you feel them. Maybe I should have followed your advice. I have a titanium plate and 4 screws in my neck, so I think you made a good call going to the other football. Now, your dad, Lamar, is not only NFL royalty, but also perhaps the founding father of pro soccer here in the U.S., one of the founding fathers of Major League Soccer. What sort of tips, what things did you learn from Dad in order to find success with FC Dallas?
Well, the first thing in the soccer business, you have to learn perseverance. And my dad had that in spades. He never saw a difficult project that he didn't want to tackle and stay with to see it to it being successful. And I always like to joke that his vision for soccer in the United States was absolutely right. It was just 40 years early. He went through some very tough times with the North American Soccer League, but when Major League Soccer rolled around in the wake of the '94 World Cup, he couldn't wait to raise his hand to jump in. He wanted to get back in because he believed in the sport. He believed that it would eventually be successful in the United States. Beyond perseverance, the most important thing he taught me, and this applies to really any sports business, is it's really about the fans. It's really easy when you're involved with a professional sports team to think, well, it's about the players, it's about the coaches. At the end of the day, it's about the fans, and if you put the fans first, you're going to have a chance of being successful. Part of that is making sure you have the right facilities. He did that with the American Football League back in the 1960s and 70s. That league built a bunch of new stadiums, which really helped ensure that league would be successful. But he also did it in Major League Soccer, building the first soccer-specific stadium in Columbus, Ohio in 1999.
Amazing. Now, I grew up with my little brother, Casey. Love my brother so much, but I do remember there's some times where, we get into a little bit, slaps upside the head, those hurt. Your brother Dan is the president of FC Dallas. What is that dynamic like as you guys search to find that success at the club?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, my brother Dan and I work really well together. We see things the same way typically, not all the time, but typically. And it's a real joy to get to work with him to build a championship team in Dallas. That's been something that's been very special and a lot of fun for me. We have had a little bit of a sibling rivalry, though, here the last few years. My brother Dan is co-chair of the host committee for the Dallas World Cup effort, and I'm co-chair of the host committee for the Kansas City effort. So every time one of us has a little bit of success, there's a little bit of bragging rights, and we're not shy about sharing it.
Now, you're investing about $200 million into your Toyota Stadium there in Frisco, the home of FC Dallas. And the 2026 World Cup is going to really showcase not only yours, but several of the remarkable MLS stadiums around the country as teams utilize those for training. So my question is, when you started reimagining Toyota Stadium, kind of what were the areas that you looked to really hope to elevate for players and the fans?
Yeah, well, I mentioned a minute ago that we were involved with the construction of the first soccer-specific stadium back in 1999 in Columbus. The stadium in Dallas, Toyota Stadium, was built in 2005. And when we started construction on it, there was only 2 other soccer-specific stadiums. And even though we felt like at the time it was state-of-the-art, the truth is, a building after 20, 21 years, they're no longer state-of-the-art. And if you just look around Major League Soccer, one of the great success stories of the league over the last 30 years has been the construction and development of, I think now, 24 soccer-specific stadiums. And some of the newer ones would rival some of the best NBA arenas, NFL stadiums. So we recognized that it was time to modernize the stadium. Number one priority for us, which again is thinking about our fans, is putting a roof on it. Now in Texas, you don't need a roof typically because of the rain, but you need a roof to keep the sun from absolutely baking you, during the late afternoon games. So we'll put a roof on the entire building. We're actually taking down the clubs on both sides, the clubs and amenities on both sides, and rebuilding those from scratch. So we had 2 club spaces before. We'll have 4 very large ones in the renovated building. We're going from 24 suites to over 50 suites, so a lot more premium seating. So it'll really be a completely new building. We'll have the largest scoreboard in Major League Soccer in any of the soccer-specific stadiums. So it's going to be fantastic. Unfortunately, it's a slow process when you're playing games in a building while you renovate it. But here in a couple of years, it'll be brand new and our fans are going to love it.
Yes, no doubt. Nice and cool. As a member of MLS Sporting and Competition Committee, you're deeply involved in all things competition. So what are your thoughts on this historic move we're going to have for MLS going to a summer to spring schedule in 2027 after this upcoming World Cup?
Yeah, I really think it's going to be transformative. It's a subject that we've discussed for 30 years now. And there have been points in the league's evolution where we thought about making the switch, but the argument was always that the weather wouldn't work for the majority of the league. And we just finally made the decision that in the best interest of the league, we need to be on the calendar that most of the rest of the world is on, particularly Europe. It'll align our transfer windows. Right now, we have this difficult situation of having our main transfer window being in the middle of the European season, so it's hard to bring in talent. And then in the middle of their off season, we're still in season, so you don't want to sell players. So we think it'll really increase the number of inbound players and also outbound players. It'll be very helpful there. I think it'll also make a major difference being able to have our playoffs in May. At this point, our playoffs really go up against college football and the NFL, and that's stiff competition. And so putting them in a time frame where they won't be as encumbered from a competitive standpoint, I think will be really beneficial. So I'm looking forward to it. It's been a long time coming, but it's going to be great.
I want to embarrass someone. Is Don Garber in the house today? There he is. Commissioner Don Garber is here today. Let's embarrass him a little bit.
Yeah.
How would you describe your working relationship with Commissioner Don Garber and his impact on MLS since joining the league way back in 1999?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the few people with Major League Soccer who at this point predates Don, having joined before the league was formed in 95. Don came on board in 1999, and I think the project that he thought he was signing up for was very different than it turned out very quickly. The league went through a very difficult time, 2001, 2002. We actually had to contract to keep the league alive. And I can definitively say that we would not have made it without Don's leadership at that time. He got together with my dad, Robert Kraft, and Phil Anschutz, and really the 4 of them kept the league together during this very, very difficult time and very quickly set it on a path towards growth. At that point, we went from 12 teams to 10 teams, and it was only 5 or so years later where we were starting to expand by 2 teams a year. And look at where the league is today with 30 franchises, with a deal with Apple TV that we think is very attractive. All of that's happened under Don's leadership, and I think he's done a fantastic job. I really like to compare him to Pete Rozelle, who was the commissioner of the National Football League during very much its early growth phase from the 60s into the 80s. I think Don has served a similar role, and Major League Soccer would not be where it is today without him.
Incredible. A round of applause for Mr. Don Garber. Now, I don't think I see Mr. Arthur Blank here, so I'm going to try to get by with this because he heard me, he would kill me. But FC Dallas has arguably created the greatest player pipeline among U.S. clubs. Weston McKennie, Ricardo Pepi, Chris Richards, Tanner Tessman, coming through your academy to play for the national team. Current starter Bernard Kamungo came up through your MLS Next program, pro team, and playing a key role the past few years. So what is FC Dallas philosophy when it comes to developing its players? What's the secret sauce that you continue to be able to pump out some of the best players in North America and, quite frankly, the Western Hemisphere?
Well, going back about 20 years ago, MLS made a decision that we needed to focus on youth development. It's something that's been happening around the world in the sport of soccer for many, many decades. And we just felt like we were not doing a good enough job. Fortunately, Dallas, for many years, has been a hotbed for youth soccer. And ironically, the reason for that was my dad's involvement with the Dallas Tornado. The players who came over to play for the Dallas Tornado in the 1960s and 1970s needed jobs during the off season. And they did what they knew. They started camps, they started clinics, and they started youth soccer teams. And so we had this very big boom in youth soccer in Dallas. So when the league made this pivot and started to focus on developing homegrown players that could eventually, hopefully, play for the first team, it was an easy thing for us to embrace, and we went all in on it. As you mentioned, over the years, we've developed a lot of players who played for the youth national team. In fact, a funny story from Qatar in 2022, one of our former players told me, at practice, we break into two groups, those that came up with the FC Dallas Academy and the rest of the team. And they were roughly equal. And which is very, very humorous, but just shows the number of players that have come through that system, many of whom have played for FC Dallas before moving on to Europe. And really the key to it is you have to have a willingness to play the players. If the players don't believe that they have a shot of playing for the first team, you're not going to be able to keep them. And you're also not going to develop them if they're not getting minutes playing against older players who are much more experienced. The development of MLS Next Pro has been very, very beneficial to our efforts because now we have a stepping stone between the academy and the first team. And we've had many players. You mentioned Bernard Kamungo, who's an amazing story. He came to the U.S. As a Tanzanian refugee and was playing high school soccer somewhere in Texas, and his brother paid $50 for him to come try out for MLS Next Pro. And we signed him on the spot, and he has now developed into a professional who's a regular starter for FC Dallas. And it just goes to show, if you'll give those players opportunities, there's a lot of talent in the U.S., and it's something that we need to continue to focus on as we think about the World Cup cycle 4 years from now and 8 years from now.
So youth development has been a cornerstone for FC Dallas, but we're also now seeing MLS clubs becoming active sellers in the global transfer market. How important is that for today's MLS clubs and their business models?
Yeah, so globally, the transfer market is very important for the health and the quality of play for teams around the world. There are leagues like the Premier League, which are largely buyers of players, and then there are leagues in Brazil and Portugal who are largely sellers of talent. And for MLS, we need to be really good at both. We're very focused on continuing to improve the quality of play in Major League Soccer by bringing in talented players. I'll give a little shout out to Petar Musa, who's the star striker for FC Dallas, who's going to be on the Croatian national team for the World Cup this summer. He's a player that we bought 3 years ago, and at a minimum scores about 18 goals a year, and I think he'll be well above that this year. So that's an example of a player that we bought and brought in who's done very well. Conversely, Ricardo Pepi, who is a player who will be on the U.S. national team this summer, also a star striker, is a player that came up through our system as a youth, and we eventually made the decision to sell him to Europe. It was what he wanted to do, where he wanted to take his career, but we were able to take those proceeds and reinvest them in the roster. In fact, some of those proceeds helped us bring in Petar Musa. So it just shows you it's very important to the overall health of any soccer league, but particularly Major League Soccer.
Major League Soccer's seen a boom in expansion over the past decade. New ownership groups, soccer-specific stadiums. You have these record club valuations. So from an owner's perspective, what do you think are some of the impetus or catalysts for that surge in value that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a recognition by investors and people who are interested in the sport that soccer has finally arrived in the United States. Certainly if you go back to 1994 or even 1996 when Major League Soccer was founded, it was still early. My dad was definitely a believer. He knew it was eventually going to be a big thing, but I think it was really just early in terms of having a big enough fan base. We now have a very large fan base of the sport of soccer in the United States, and there's a tremendous opportunity for Major League Soccer to gain market share. And I think the investors see that. They're willing to make the investment in the stadiums. I mentioned earlier the infrastructure that we have in terms of soccer-specific stadiums is absolutely incredible today. The investments that are being made in the player side of the business, in the coaching and technical side of the business, everybody sees the opportunity and is making the investment, and as a result, the product on the field continues to get better, and our fan bases continue to grow and be more avid.
Both Kansas City and Dallas selected as official host cities for this upcoming 2026 World Cup. What will that moment mean to you and to your family?
It'll be very special, and I no doubt will think about my dad a lot throughout it. In '94, Dallas was a host for the '94 World Cup, but Kansas City was not. And he was very disappointed about that. We'd put in a bid to have games at Arrowhead Stadium, and it just didn't happen. My dad was chairman of the Dallas host committee effort, and Dallas did a fantastic job in '94, but I knew deep down that he was disappointed about Kansas City. So we're thrilled to have games in both cities. And it's not just a few games. It's 9 games in Dallas, 6 games in Kansas City. Dallas is once again going to host the International Broadcast Center, so you could argue that it'll really be the epicenter of the World Cup during the tournament. And Kansas City and Dallas have gotten some amazing matches with Argentina, Holland, England playing games, group stage games in all those cities. And then Kansas City recently has become sort of the epicenter of the training camps. We have Argentina coming, we have England coming, and we have Holland coming. So 3 Tier 1 teams are going to base camp in Kansas City for the duration of the camp, which is really amazing. I think it speaks to the facilities in Kansas City, and also the central location and a very welcoming environment.
Yeah, let's touch on what you're getting to there a little bit more. You mentioned the '94 in Dallas, and it's a top 5 media market, so kind of no surprise that they were chosen as a host city this time. Kansas City, not so much, although they have shown that they can really put on a great show, right? With the NFL draft, I was there covering that. It was phenomenal. The fans came out and showed out. The stadium itself is the loudest stadium I've ever played in. I'll never forget the time I dropped an interception playing your Chiefs, Trent Green, and the whole crowd just kind of laughed. I still hear it in my head. But the loudest stadium. But what is it, in your opinion, about Kansas City that has earned the right to be able to host a World Cup? And you can't say barbecue.
The barbecue is important because when those teams came to visit Kansas City, the various federations, they all had barbecue, and they loved it. So can't discount the barbecue. But I think it's really just has been a great effort on the part of the organizing committee in Kansas City to make sure everybody feels very welcomed. And that goes back, 8 years ago when we started on the bid process. And we were probably on the outside looking in with FIFA. But we were able to convince them that, hey, that this is a special place. We will fill up Arrowhead Stadium unquestionably for the games. The atmosphere will be absolutely amazing, and the people who come to Kansas City are going to have a great time. On top of that, the facilities throughout the region from a soccer standpoint are among the best in the country. And that's both on the men's and the women's side of the sport. We have tremendous facilities there. So it's going to be a fun month in Kansas City. We're looking forward to it and excited to get to host the world's biggest tournament.
No doubt. If your dad could see MLS today, from 1996 to Messi to the 2026 World Cup now on the horizon, what do you think is something that might surprise him most?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question because I think we're living in this reality that he believed was going to happen. And he got to see the early versions of the soccer-specific stadiums. He'd be thrilled that there are 24 with more coming on the horizon there. I think he always believed there would be approximately 30 teams. I know he would absolutely be thrilled to see players like Messi, some of the best players in the world, playing in the league. Although I do remember back from his days in the North American Soccer League, Pelé. When I went to the 1974 World Cup, one of the first people I met with him was Pelé, which that was pretty cool. And I didn't know how cool it really was. But that sort of led to Pelé coming to the U.S. to play for the Cosmos. I think he would be thrilled about where we are and be a big believer in where the league can go and where the sport can go in the future.
Speaking of the future, let's kind of fast forward past this upcoming World Cup. And for the next decade or so, how do you envision MLS, FC Dallas, and the sport as a whole in the U.S. and in Canada? How do you see that being impacted?
Well, one thing that's proved true pretty much every World Cup is that it gives the domestic league and the sport overall a big boost in the markets where it's hosted. And you can just go down the line, Germany, Japan, Korea, they all receive 20 to 30% boosts in their leagues from an attendance standpoint, from a fan base standpoint. And I would be disappointed if we don't at least do that well here. If you go back to '94, think about what a pivotal moment that was for the sport here. It really led to restarting the professional game in the United States with the founding of Major League Soccer and tremendous growth that we've experienced over the last 30 years. But I think the country is at this perfect time where we have a large number of fans who follow the sport of soccer. Maybe not all of them Major League Soccer, but through the World Cup, where we'll have at least 40 players playing on World Cup rosters, we being Major League Soccer, you're going to have a lot of fans learn about their Major League Soccer team, and I think that'll lead to increased viewership and fandom after the Cup.
It's been incredible to get your insight and your perspective on all that's happening and all that's about to happen. But before we go, I wanted to do a quick round of rapid fire inside the mind of Clark Hunt, if you're game. You game?
Game.
Let's do this. Favorite place to vacation?
Colorado.
Why?
I love the mountains.
Your position when you played soccer?
Right back.
Most memorable moment from when you played soccer?
Making the NCAA quarterfinals.
Awesome. If you have the U.S. team happen to be eliminated in this upcoming World Cup, who would you root for?
As a family, we've always rooted for Brazil because in the early days, the U.S. wasn't in the tournament when we were attending, and we fell in love with not only the beauty of the play of Brazil, but also their fans and the samba dances in the stands.
Love that. You're not a samba dance? Can we get a little cue the music?
After you.
Okay. After. Where was your first date? Your wife was such a big part of your life.
It was at the Country Club Plaza in Kansas City.
And how'd it happen?
I cornered her at a luncheon and asked her a question which no female can really say no to, which was, would you like to go out sometime?
You went back to your football playing days and tackled her, it sounds like. If you were a superhero, what would you want your superpower to be?
To be able to fly.
Ooh, I love that. And what would be your kryptonite, that thing that makes you weak, just zaps all your powers?
Small children.
That's how I lost my hair, I think. Last one for you, Mr. Hunt. Describe your dad in 3 words.
Visionary, leader, and humble.
Sounds a lot like you. Can't wait for the world, the fans to see Kansas City and the World Cup in Kansas City and to taste its barbecue. It's been a pleasure, man.
And absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with colleagues interested in leadership, ownership, and the global business of sports. Here's something to think about. How do you honor legacy while still making bold decisions for the future? I'd love to hear your perspective. Send me a note at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another conversation from the stage featuring leaders shaping the future of sports business. Until next time, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.